attend. Sarah, are you with us? I saw you jump in.
I am.
Cool, awesome. I'll just hand over to you to give a bit of the background and some answer any Q&A at the end.
Thank you. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you, Emma, for inviting me. It's a bit of an earlier start for me this morning at 8 o'clock in Melbourne. Um, but it's a real pleasure to be here to talk to you a bit more about the project. I'll just kick off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I am meeting on today, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and pass that same respects to any First Peoples on this call today. Um, it's been a real honour to talk to Emma about this project and really reflect on where we started and where we got to. We did a lot of work over about 18 months to figure out what we needed to be doing to understand what a good youth employer was, starting right back at the attitude gap report, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, that was done quite a few years ago. And that was really our starting point of where we looked at and really acknowledging that things had not really moved on very much from that point, and there was still this huge gap between our young people, our rangatahi, and our employers, and what we needed to do to understand what was happening, and really thinking about COVID and how that had impacted our Māori and Pacifica rangatahi in particular, and how needs were growing and young people were becoming a larger demographic of our unemployed across Aotearoa, and what we needed to do. So when we were looking at the ecosystem across youth employment, there was lots of amazing organisations, many that are on this call today, that were doing great work with our rangatahi to upskill them, support them, scaffold them into that employment through courses, CVs, skills development, like John's just been talking about through the Ministry of Education. But what we found the real gap was there wasn't a lot of support for employers out there to understand, like Emma's just said, how to attract our young people, how to work with our young people as they was entering that workforce. We found out that a lot of young people leave roles of employment within those first 3 months, that it's really difficult for them to transition into that workplace. It was a really alien space for them. They felt really misunderstood. They didn't understand the rules that were in the workplace, and there wasn't a lot of that whanaungatanga built in to scaffold to support them to retain that job and feel that they could see success in that organisation. So we looked at how whanaungatanga was very important at all stages for our rangatahi, not only as they are looking for jobs, entering jobs, but also retaining jobs and understanding how they could progress and be successful and thrive in that employment, and understand where they fit and how that worked within that wider community and hapu that was so important for them, and recognizing that they didn't just come as an individual, but they came as part of a collective, and that was important to be able to take all these other people that were important on that journey with them. So thinking about how we had to upskill and work with our employers more than our young people, we developed a working group that had a number of large employers on that wanted to be part of this journey and understand what we needed to do. So we broke it down into 4 key components that were really focused on on an employer journey of how they worked with young people. So looking at how they actually attract young people. And what we did was we looked for really good examples of how that worked and how employers were connecting really well with young people. We spoke to a lot of young people around what they were looking for when they were looking for jobs, what would make them apply for jobs. And what we found was it was a lot of employers that were moving into young people's space, moving away from those more traditional methods that they found really confusing. It wasn't accessible, the language wasn't accessible for them. And I know I'm preaching to a lot of the converted here, because I know that Emma and all the organisations that you folks do a lot of this amazing work, but we found a great example of a lady that was on TikTok, and she was just a recruiter for quite a large organization. And she just did little videos where she removed all the barriers. She introduced herself. The young person could see who they were talking to. She encouraged them to slide into her DMs and ask questions about the employment, what they needed to do. And all they needed to do to apply was reach out to her, talk to her, have a quick conversation, grab a coffee, like we're saying, build that Whanona Tanga. They could bring a support person if they wanted. And it was those little small steps that were really helping scaffold that young person to understand those expectations, what was needed when they arrived, and who they were going to meet. It wasn't this blank face, big corporation that they were going into, and it was really quite confronting and scary for them. And we broke it down into four parts. Sorry, so like I said, the attraction, the actual recruitment part. So what you're doing during the interviews, onboarding, how that was really important those first few months. What were you doing building that Whanona Tanga to really embed them, feel like they were part of your organization? And then what were you doing as your organization to make that young person feel like they could thrive, upskill them, and that they could see a pathway for them in your organization? um, I think we bit off a bit more than we could chew. You know, I know that Emma's got some ideas that you can do things slowly to kind of embed that change, and basically it's around a culture shift that we were trying to build into our employers to support them to make these little incremental changes of where they could make these really big change, these small changes that would have a big impact on their rangatahi as they were coming through. Um, Alongside that, we also created some workshops for employers through the employer pledge. So employers, it was free; they could come on board, and we delivered four face-to-face meetings every quarter with a different theme, and they were really great for our employers because we offered upskilling and training. But what I always put was our rangatahi at the centre, so it was always rangatahi led. There was lots of rangatahi speakers, and the feedback that we got from employers was it's always really good to hear that from young people. It really empowered them to make that shift. It really built that empathy and that understanding in our employers to understand what those some of those barriers were for our young people, and actually really small shifts could have a significant impact on what was happening in their organization. um, so that's about the history of the project. And so when we got there, we were just really at a prototype with the design team that Emma's brilliantly got on board now, so we can take that baton. And I think Emma's shared some of those resources and ideas and findings that we've got. But like Emma said, unfortunately, by the time we'd kind of built that prototype, Tataki was downsizing, and we had to stop all that work. So it's really great that you guys are going to take that on and understand those next steps and how that can grow and impact our rangatahi further and uplift them to thrive in those amazing roles that they deserve. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a bit of a download of where we've come from and the kaupapa, and that history of where it comes from. So if there's any questions or anything you want to ask me, I'll be here for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate that. Do we have any questions?
Do you have the link for that TikTok? Because it'd be quite handy because we're working with industry to show them an example of what looks good.
Yeah, it might not be TikTok, it might be Instagram, but I will be able
Doesn't
to
matter.
find it. I will be able to find it, Beth. And there's another one on there, which another organization, which I'll send you, did basically a day in the life video, and so it's
Brilliant.
got like,
Yeah,
it's literally this girl just comes in, it's her on the train, and it's her in a meeting, and they've like, it's a really cool place. They've got a pool room and stuff, but it's her having lunch with colleagues, and again, it's
nice.
just that insight.
Yeah, yeah,
It's got the American voiceover, and it's got the little tingy music, but I think it had over like 2 million hits, like
yeah,
ridiculous amount of
yeah,
interaction. And it's just that you just is very simple things, but seem to be really difficult to get done when we've got a lot of bureaucracy and privacy things around TikTok and Instagram. But I will send you some of those great examples that we've got.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Because it's absolutely, the kids don't understand the work culture, and sometimes it can seem really scary, whereas just even photos or even just a little thing can make a big difference. Awesome. Awesome work.
Yeah, definitely. And just being able to see other young people in that workforce and see, you know, I can't be what I can't see. And that's really important to break that. Like, it's not all these older people that are just there. They are young people for me to interact with.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Greatly appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us. And for that mahi that you did, I hope it's heartening to know that it hasn't just disappeared into a big black hole, and it's going to be taken up and developed further, and we'll make sure it gets widely shared out there. Yeah. So I'll just move on to talk a little bit about this project briefly, answer any questions before we go into our breakout rooms. I'm someone who normally likes to speak off the cuff, but because I'm like time poor, I'm like, I need to focus on what I need to say. So I will read off some notes. So the working groups are a bit fluid at this time. So we have some people who couldn't make it, some who have just joined, and it might change a little bit as we go, because of course, you know, people come and go in roles and all that sort of stuff. But we have a huge amount of people here. I'm really excited that we've got over 30 on this project. I think that's really significant. It's important that when we go forward to pilot this, that we can say that it was developed by the wider community. This isn't just a YEA project at all. This is something that everybody owns. And on that, it's going to be a free and open resource. Whatever it is we create will be able to be picked up by industry, by government, modified to their needs, branded, you know, with their logos, etc., and utilised, because that's what we want to see systems change. We need it to have a broad uptake. We also have some people who don't have either the capacity to join us for these working groups, or who don't quite fit into a working group. Most importantly, that's Ara Taiohi, who developed the Mana Taiohi, a principle-based framework that informs the way people who work with young people work in Aotearoa. So they're an important partner for us going forward, particularly in terms of if we want to apply for, well, we will be applying for future funding to support the pilot. So if you're not familiar with the Mana Taiohi, or you feel like we probably need a refresher, which was my case, I should have put that into the welcome pack, but I'll add it in there. And on that welcome pack, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep feeding things into it. So that'll be our one document that you'll have as a resource to go to. So we'll just keep everything together in one place to make it easier for everyone. We've also a list of employers who are willing to trial the prototypes as we go through this, developing this resource. And by the end of May, we plan to have a fully formed prototype that we can pilot. And I've been in conversation with funders to support that already. So we have the framework, and we do need to expand on this, because obviously, as Sarah was talking about, the focus for Tātaki was the Māori and Pacifica young people. And for YEA, we in our trustees, we have identified Māori, Pacifica, and disabled and NEETs as our key cohorts. So we do need to expand that framework a little bit, and we'll do some of that work today. This framework will then help us to create the resource that we hope will help bridge this attitude gap that was, someone's already mentioned, it was Sarah, back in 2016 with the Attitude Gap Challenge report. So the link to that is in the welcome packs on our website as well. So have a look at that if you haven't already. It's a great piece of work. So what we really want to create is a resource that will help employers and their young employees build a relationship that will lead to greater engagement and retention of youth in the workplace. So I think we all here today know what the problem is, and we have a pretty good idea of the whys and how it's manifesting. So what we really need everyone to focus in on is like, what is it we're going to do? What's going to enable us to alleviate this problem? What a resource need to be able to do to make our young people want to engage with their mahi and develop within the organisation of business that they're working with. So we're not trying to create a silver bullet. What we want is a useful tool that can help stretched, financially challenged, and oftentimes frustrated employers, and ultimately create a better work experience and environment for our rangatahi. So whatever we create needs to be informed by universal design principles. It needs to be developed in accordance with mana te ohi, and it needs to be cheap to reproduce. So universal design principle is something that we'll look at in more detail in our second session. It might be a bit of a new concept for some people, but effectively what it means is creating something that is accessible to all people, regardless of their needs, special needs, cultural backgrounds, etc. Which is not an easy thing to do, right? And also we've got to be mindful that we're not trying to create a one-size-fits-all approach, because that also doesn't work. So it might be that what we're doing is starting the process, right? And what we create is a starting point that can be built upon. So it might be that our Māori working group say, actually, we want something that's very much te ao Māori, and uses a lot more te reo, and that's cool. We can move on to that in another phase. So I guess the point is, like, come with your ideas and we're going to see where this goes, because we don't have a firm understanding of what it is we're going to create yet, because that needs to be generated through the discourse that we're going to have with all of you. On pages 10 and 11 of the welcome pack, you'll find the questions. Our team leads have these as well. So when you go into breakout rooms, they'll make sure that we're staying on track in terms of answering some of those questions. But we also want to know, like, what questions have we not asked? Like, what is it that we've forgotten about? So again, feel free to open up, express your thoughts on this. We're not the experts. We're a collective here. We need the experience and wisdom of everyone in the room. So the lead in the team will be someone from GYE predominantly, or one of the project team leads that I just introduced earlier. The following two workshops will be just with the working groups, not collectively like this. So I'm happy for each working group to figure out when's the best time and day to meet. I just would really like it to happen, the next one early March, so in the first 2 weeks of March, and then the next one will be the first 2 weeks of April, and then we'll look to have everyone brought back together like this at the end of May. So as I said earlier, we've had some people join the working groups since I sent out the list. So I'll do an update to make sure that you're all across who's who in the zoo. And I'm hoping that technology is my friend today in the breakout groups work. But some people, they just didn't appear on the list, and I checked that they were in the invite, and they were in the invite, but they weren't showing my list. So if you're stuck here at the end and you're like, I'm not in a working group, I'll add you as we go. But before I do that, do we have any questions? Is there anything in the chat? I haven't actually had a look. Cool. Does that make sense? Do we feel more or less like we know what our purpose is and what we're going to do? Cool. Okay, fingers crossed. Okay, good. A couple of thumbs ups. That this breakout thing works. So I will send you off, and then I'll pull you all back together at the last 5 minutes just to close the meeting with everybody. Just once again, thank you so much for being a part of this project. Okay, let's see if this works.